Hello, everybody. My name is Wes Grimes, and I'm going to be walking through upgrading from Angular 7 to Angular 8 and NgRx version 8 tonight. I did this last night. Gonna do it again tonight. Hopefully, record it this time. And we'll also talk about some of the new creator features in Angular and NgRx version 8, and show you how to get going. So. Without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and we will get going. Feel free to pipe in. This is a very laid back environment, and I'm just going to kind of walk through the pieces. All right. So before we get started here, I do want to walk through the app, kind of show you what's going on. This is just a sample app that I've written to demo some of the features of NgRx. So let me go ahead and run it here. And I'll just do an ng serve and get this thing going. This is currently in version 7, NgRx version 7. Just want to show you what is going on. All right, so we'll go ahead and load up Chrome and go to our local host. So there is a free API, and that is out there that's called the Chuck Norris API. So you can get to it. It's icndb.com, and it's just really, if you're just trying to learn a new technology or try out some techniques, it's a good API to do it. It does not have any kind of CORS issues, so you don't need a backend. You can come right from the front end to call it, and basically has a couple endpoints where you can get back a JSON array of jokes. So that's what we'll be using tonight. So basically the app comes and loads up, and on initialize it grabs 5 random jokes, and then you can click on a joke to jump over to see the detail. And this, this joke says, don't worry about tests. Chuck Norris's test cases cover your code too. So let's try another one. For Chuck Norris, NP hard is 01. What else we got here? The Chuck Norris Eclipse plugin made alien contact. So it's just some fun jokes going on. We can click the refresh button. You saw that there was a loading bar that displayed. And basically, all of this is powered by NgRx. So we should be good to go with that. We've also got our dev tools where we can see our actions being dispatched and look at our state. We're using the NgRx entity module to kind of manage our list of entities. And then, yeah, so that's the app as it stands. Again, we're going to upgrade it to version 8 of Angular and version 8 of NgRx, and then convert the actions, effects, and reducer into using the new creator functions. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out, and I'm going to stop the process, and we will get started. So the first thing we want to do is what we want to do first is upgrade our dependencies. And so to do that, we're just going to come in here and make sure that we have the latest version of the Angular CLI installed. There are alternatives to this. I've seen folks using npx to run it. I'm just going to go ahead and update my global version. All right, so we're on the latest version of the CLI. And now we're going to go and use the really cool schematics that are built in to update first Angular and then NgRx. One thing I do want to show is there's a great page that the Angular team has put together. That's just update.angular.io. And you can put the version you're coming from and the version you're going to. And you can choose some things like app complexity. And you can tell the package manager you're using, and you can say, show me how to update. And then it actually walks you through the process. It mentions some breaking changes, and then the steps you want to go through. So yeah, I mean, really, we're just going to jump down here. I'm not using the old HTTP client module, so we're good there. Or the old HTTP module, I should say, the legacy one. I'm using HTTP client module. So we'll go ahead and update our core framework and CLI in the local project by running ng update Angular CLI and Angular core. So we'll go ahead and run that. And feel free to hop in the chat and ask any questions if I'm going too fast. If you need me to slow down, or if you want me to cover a topic, just pop in the chat and let me know. All right, so it's going through upgrading our dependencies. Almost done. The fan on my computer is spinning pretty hard, so it's getting close. And while that's running, I do want to kind of show you the layout of the app. Basically, we have our top level app component, which really just has a router outlet and a header in it. And then we have two kind of main routes. We have a jokes route to show that list of jokes, and then we have a jokes detail, which basically shows an individual joke once you click on it. Then in our app module, nothing really crazy going on here. We're using Angular material, so we've imported those, and we're importing our routes. We have a service, just a data service, and this data service has one method called getJokes. And basically, it's making a call to that API that we mentioned earlier. And that API, if we pass it jokes random 5 and then say escape JavaScript limit to nerdy, that's just saying give us 5 random jokes from the Chuck Norris database that are a nerdy category. And we want them in JSON format. So that's going to give it back to us. Now, I have had problems. See, I just got an error here. I had this problem before, and it has something to do with, I think it's a Windows permissions issue. And what I actually did to resolve it was do an npm CI, which blows away your node modules and recreates them. I just want to check something here. Yeah, it looks like it made it partially through. So I'm going to roll back my package JSON. This is a great thing about Git. You can see what files were changed on the system and just roll them back. This was just me turning the font size up. So we'll stage that. Okay, so we rolled it back. Let's go ahead and do an npm CI to blow away our local node modules. So while that's running, as I was saying before, we have our data service that returns a basically an observable of an array of joke. And so joke is just an interface with an ID and a number. So that's what the API is giving us back. The joke string, and that's just the full text of the joke, and then the ID is just which joke it is. So our service is returning that. We're doing a pipe here with a map because we actually just want the value property that comes back. We don't care about the full response object in this example. So that's what we're doing there. All right, and then basically now that we've got that going, we can hop over to our container. So the container is basically the route, the main route page that's going to hit. And this has in it a child component called app joke card list, which takes in jokes, loading indicator, an error if there is one, and then has two event handlers for refresh and select that we'll make use of. So once these values get pushed down, the observables will be subscribed to and automatically unsubscribed from. Angular will handle that for us with the pipe async method. I like to do it that way as opposed to manually subscribing, because then I have to hold on to that subscription and then on destroy, unsubscribe. And so it's a lot cleaner if you can do it right from, let Angular do it for you from the template. All right. So in our ng on init for that, go ahead and do it a little bit. Basically, we have a couple observables that we're passing down where we just use our selectors from the store to pull those in. We have our select all jokes. We have a select joke error, and a select joke is loading. Then we have our two event handlers on refresh and on select, which dispatch our actions. We have a refresh action and a select action. Okay. I'm going to hop back over to our app component where we do also have an action here to do the initial load of jokes. This is so when we first open the app up, we have jokes displayed in the list. I didn't put this in the ng on init on the jokes page because I didn't want it to refresh the jokes every time you went from the detail page back to the main page. So this only happens once at the beginning. All right, and then the only other thing is our joke detail page. Similar concept. It has a child, or actually this one doesn't have a child component, but it does have three selectors that we're pulling from for observables for the joke, the error, and the is loading. This would get the current joke out of the store, and I'll hop over to the actual store in a minute so you can see all that. So basically, when you navigate to this page, by the time it gets here, the joke, the current joke's already been set on the store, so it just pulls it out and then displays it. Really, there's not much need to go into the child components, but we do have our child components. These are pretty dumb. They don't do anything with interacting with services or the store or observables. By the time it gets here, everything's been kind of resolved. So it's just rendering of those items, right? So then that just brings us to our store. So, and again, we haven't upgraded yet. This is version 7, and I've got my actions. So we'll just review that. And again, remember in NgRx 7, kind of the best practice for actions was for every action you define, you'd have to define three kind of pieces. This will still work in NgRx 8. Don't get me wrong. You can definitely still do it this way. But we'll have a new option for you to choose. So again, we have a load action, which is from the jokes page. A load failure. Actually, we say jokes page. This is really the app component. And then we have load failure. So this is when the API returns a failure to us. It's an action for us to dispatch. We have a load success when the API returns a success. And then we have a refresh and a select, those two different events from the jokes page to give us the option to refresh the jokes we have when we click on that button, and also to select a current joke. So again, the first part is you need this action types enum. The second part is we have to define a class for our actions. Our load action does not have a payload to it. And so we basically define as load action, implements action, and it just has a type set to our enum right here. The load failure does take a payload of error. So this is our error that may occur because remember, this action will actually get dispatched from the joke API when a failure occurs. And so we want to put that failure on the store. We have a success when we get back our jokes from the API so that we have those in the payload. And then we have a refresh. There's no payload for the refresh. It is what it is. And then we have a select. And with the select action, we definitely want to pass the ID of the joke we're selecting. So that's a payload. Then the last part is our actions union. And really, this should, be called actions union like that. So our actions union is used in our reducer, and also I believe it's used in the effect. So let's go ahead and hop over to the reducer. We're using NgRx entity to manage this. It's probably a little overkill for this app because we're only ever just dumping the entire payload of jokes into the store. But if you're working with entities where you need to update in place or upsert or remove a specific one, the entity modules is great to work with. And so basically we have our feature reducer, and I'm actually going to hop over to our state first. So our state has the jokes because it's an entity adapter. It then has an isLoading property, an error property, and then a selected joke ID property. So those are the values that we're going to keep track of. We go back to our reducer. When we do a load action, we actually want to go ahead and clear out any error message that might have been there previously, and then set our loading to true. This is important because this is how we can make our progress bar display when it's in the middle of loading data. And so now we move on to our load success. So load success, we're going to use our entity module, entity adapter to do an add all. So we want to take the jokes payload and update the state with that. And then we're going to set our loading back to false because we're done at that point, and we're going to clear any error that might be there out. And if there's a failure action, we just want to turn off the loading indicator. We don't want the progress bar to continue looping if it's actually done. And then we want to pop the error into the store so that we can display it to the user on the screen. And then the last action that we're going to handle in this reducer is the select action, which is really just a matter of setting the selected joke ID on the store to the payload. You notice we don't have refresh in here because refresh is not actually going to directly update the state. We're going to hook it in with our effects in a minute. It just provides a more direct hook to what action the user took, which is good action hygiene. So So the next thing is let's pop over to our effects. We've really got 3 effects going on here. We have our load request effect. So when a load action is dispatched, it makes a call to the data service to get the jokes. And on success of that, we map to a load success action and pass in the jokes that got back as the payload. If there's an error that occurs, we go ahead and just dispatch or map to a failure action with the error included. The next effect is our refresh. This is really just kind of a hook in to say when the refresh action is dispatched, go ahead and map that to a load action because it's doing the same thing. To me, it's a little cleaner than creating an entire copy of the load request effect that basically will do the same thing. So I just tied it in that way. Then the last one is we're actually doing, we're using effects for things other than, maybe the typical use case. And in this case, we're going to use it to actually navigate to a different page. This is kind of the trick of how when we dispatch the select action, you'll notice it actually redirected you to the detail page. So we just use a tap because we don't want to modify the flow of the observable. And then we set a dispatch of false. So this is important because we don't actually return an action through this. So really that should go away. So we're not actually returning an action. We're just routing. And this is where this one ends. And because in our reducer, we're setting the joke ID for select, then it gets set at that point. So the effect is just kind of there to help us route to the page. All right. So then, so that's the reducer, the effects, there's our actions, and our state, we talked about that. Our selectors, really we have a, really the main key one is our select current joke, which gives us back the current joke for the selected joke ID in the store. And then we have one to pull back the joke error and also if the joke is loading. And we also have the select all joke items to build that list on the main jokes page. All right. So that's kind of how the store works today. And now let's go ahead and proceed, now that you've got that overview, with upgrading to the new version of Angular. So I'm going to run my ng update CLI in Angular core. It's updating our package JSON dependencies. All right. Cycling through that. All right, it's cleaning up items. Almost done here. For everything that's going on, it's really not that slow, to be honest with you. It's pretty quick. All right. So again, once we update from version 8 to version 8 of Angular, we'll go ahead and update NgRx to version 8. All right, almost finished. Oh, we got our error again. All right, so I'm going to do an npm CI. I think it's just a permissioned issue on my computer. Invalid lock files. So let's do an npm install. That's because our package lock needed to be updated because we updated to Angular 8. If you're most likely if you're on a Mac or Linux like Ubuntu or something, you probably won't have this issue. Or if you're using something like Windows Subsystem on Linux. This is kind of the boring part of the process, but we'll get into the fun stuff in just a minute once we get our packages updated. Okay. So let's check our package JSON and see what we have been updated to. Oops. So looks like we've got some things that didn't get updated. So this is where I'm actually going to run ng update and see if it can tell me what's going on. So we do have Angular material, so let's go ahead and do an update on that for this library. If you don't have Angular material, then you don't need to worry about this. So we'll go ahead and do an ng update, Angular material. Oh, it's asking me to commit what I've got first. So I'm going to do that. So say update to Angular v8. All right. And then we'll do our ng update material, Angular material. Okay. So now our material is updated. Let's do another ng update. See if we can see what else is left. So looks like for some reason our HTTP module is still back on 7.2. Let's do an ng update Angular core again. Nope, let's go next to add. So we'll just say update to Angular material v8. Run our ng update again. Angular is already up to date. Let's just do an npm install. I find it hard to believe that most people are going to encounter this. I think I'm just dealing with a dependency issue. So the Angular HTTP. Now, see, I wonder if we just update that manually. We'll go ahead and do an npm install. You know what? I think that's the old carryover from the deprecated Angular HTTP library. I'm going to actually remove that and do an npm install. Okay, and then now if we do an ng update, cool. So now we're left with our ng update for the NgRx store. So that brings us to the next part. Let me go ahead and commit my package JSON and package lock. So we'll just say update remaining steps to v8. And then we'll do ng update. This is to update the NgRx store to version 8. We'll do ng update at NgRx store. So that's going to update effects, entity, store, and store dev tools. Those are the libraries or the modules that this particular app is using. All right, so looks like it finished. We'll go ahead and add those. And then we'll just say updating NgRx to version 8. Okay. So now, for a while, we're done with the terminal. So I'm going to close that out. We're going to get into the fun part. So I just want to confirm my dependencies are good. Now, in reality, I actually can just run this as is. This should be just fine. So I'm going to do an ng serve just to prove that. There are some breaking changes I highly recommend you read. There's a good blog post I'll put in the notes that the NgRx team has put together detailing all the changes and updates in version 8, as well as any breaking changes. We also have a migration page on our website, NgRx.io, that down in the bottom left, you can say, here, I'll pull it up here so everybody can see. So if you go to docs, and then migrations, and then V8, this actually walks through the process of updating. And it does review all the breaking changes. So won't go into that tonight, but that is there, ngrx.io, and if you click docs, and then you go to migrations, V8, okay? All right, so our app's running. We'll go ahead and just make sure that we can do the same things we did before. Yep, we got our jokes back. We can see our joke detail. We have our dev tools, so we're good. So now let's take advantage of some of the new features with version 8 of NgRx. First thing is I'll start with actions. So if you remember before, there's kind of 3 parts that made up an action. There was the enum, there was the classes that you would define with a constructor, and then you had your actions union. Well, with version 8, we have an option to use a creator function. So let's take one of these actions and refactor it to use that. So we on the NgRx team have actually contributed to John Papa's VS Code Angular snippets library, and I have that installed. So as an extension, right? And in here, we have added a series of NgRx snippets. So we just moved them, the latest version, we moved them in the README so that you can see them all grouped together. So we can use this to scaffold out a store, to create actions with props, reducers, effects, selectors, even some NgRx data functionality. So these are pretty cool. So basically, just start typing a-ngrx, and there they are. So we're going to do the load action, which does not require payload or props. So I'm just going to select that top one, and then we're just going to call it load. So we no longer need to have a suffix of action. Just call it load, and then it's source and then event, right? And so it's app component. And then load. All right. And then the last thing is we want to import this function called create action. So we've added that up top to our import. We can now get rid of our class. We can get rid of our action types enum for it. And we can remove it from our union. And that's it. This one line of code defines our action. It's pretty sweet. Then we'll move on to the next one. So now let's work on the failure one. Well, this one requires a payload. The correlation in the new V8 creator way would be to create props. And so we'll use our snippet, a-ngrx, create action with props. This time we'll call it load failure. And then it's the source is jokes API, and then it's load failure. And then, so again, with this action creator, the first parameter is the type of action. There's an optional second parameter where you can give it a props function. And then when you define the generic of type in it, that tells it the shape of the props. So we do need to import props. So we add that. And if you're wondering how I did that really quick, on Windows, you hit Control Dot, and that will actually show any code actions or refactoring you have available. Kind of harkens back to like ReSharper days in Visual Studio, Studio Professional, but with OmniSharp and now with the TypeScript tooling and Angular language service, we can do that here by hitting Control Dot. I think on a Mac it's maybe Command Dot. So that imported props, and then we just want to give it the shape. And so this is just going to be error, and it's a string. All right. Not sure why that's not liking that. So now we can get rid of our load failure action, our type, and our union member. All right. So now let's move on to the next one. Create another action with props. This time we'll call it a load success. The jokes API is our source, load success. And then this time around, our object is jokes, and it's a joke array. So there's our third action. We can get rid of our enum and our class and our union number. Okay, now let's move on to the refresh. So this time we don't need props, so we'll just do the top create action. And we'll just call it refresh. And the source would be the jokes page, and it's a refresh. So then we'll get rid of our enum and our class and our action number. Cool. And then we just have one more, and that's our select. So just going to finish that. The snippets really are handy, to be honest with you. All right, and then now we can actually get rid of our type union altogether and get rid of our action types enum. Perfect. So not sure why that's not auto removing, but that goes away. Every now and then I get some weirdness in VS Code. I don't know if you guys ever experienced that. Yeah, I'm going to copy that because I'm not trusting that it's going to save it. So I'm gonna actually restart VS Code. Okay. So we'll go back to our actions. Cool, looks like it saved it. So what I like to do here is actually I'll pull up the git difference, the git diff, so you can see how much code we were able to remove. It's pretty cool. So on the right is our updated code. The left is the old code. I mean, look at that, ton of code removed. So, but we didn't lose any of the benefits of the action types and the action union either. The action creator function provides all that for us. It's just taking away that boilerplate, if you will, that you used to have to do. Cool. All right, so we got our actions. Key point here is because we changed the way our actions are defined, we need to change how we dispatch our actions. So let's hop into our app component first. All right. It looks like yeah, there it goes. So here we were dispatching by newing up a class called load action. Here's the difference. We no longer need to new it up, and the method we call is different. It's just called load. So not a huge change, but that's what we need to do. It's no longer a class. These action creators are actually what you would call a factory function. And so a factory function is a function that returns a function. And then that function, when it's called, gives us an object that's basically something like type jokes page load. And if it had a payload, it might have a props object on it. So that's basically all the action creator is doing, is creating a function that returns a function that returns that object. So a very similar concept exists in the Redux world, in React as well. So you will see that in other places. That is not just an NgRx thing. So let's go ahead. I believe we've got in our jokes page on the refresh and select, we just need to refactor these actions as well. So let's go ahead and do that. So it's just refresh and take the new off and a select here. So not a huge change. Looks a little bit cleaner. So all right. Then the last place is in our effects. We need to update that part. All right. This is going to be pass one of effects. We'll come back to this in a minute and actually make use of the create effect piece. But for now, let's just make it work in place. And this is kind of proving out that you can only use, I mean, you can still use effects as they are today. But if you want to take advantage of like the create action, you can. And so what we need to do is we can now remove the generic on the of type. And then in our feature actions, we can just say feature actions.load. Because inherently that returns the type property that's on here. So we don't actually have to deal with it. That's one of the benefits of the action creator. And then down here in our map, we're not actually newing up a class. We're just calling an action creator. So we would just say load success. Same thing with the error. Just becomes load failure, like that. And then we'll come down here and update this to refresh and load. All right. Do the same thing in select. And cool. So we removed a little bit of code there. If we come over here and look at our get if, we don't have to have the generic anymore. We don't have to reference the action types enum anymore. We don't have to new up a class. So definitely some positives, some reduction in code. All right. So that has updated our effects to use the new action feature. And again, our reducer is going to have to change now. And to do that, we're just going to come here. We're going to take out our union. And then this just becomes actions. That, right? And actually, let's go ahead and take this opportunity to update our reducer. There is a way to use, and if anybody's on chat and wants to hop in and help, that'd be great, but it's okay. If not, I'll cover it later. But there is a way to I believe there's a way to still use the same reducer format with the new action creators. It's just not coming to me at the moment. So let's hop over like any good senior dev would do and do a little bit of research online. You don't have to always know every answer, but you do need to know where to get the answer from and be willing to admit that you don't know. That's actually a sign of wisdom. So if we hop over here to NgRx store and we look at our reducers here, this is our help. Yeah, I'm gonna have to defer on this. I don't believe I know the answer to this, so I think we'll just have to defer. And I'm sure that we can get a blog post out or something, or a tweet out to explain it. But for now, let's go ahead and update to use the new reducer. So, all right, to do that, we are going to use yet another creator function, and we're going to use a snippet. So we have an NgRx create reducer, right? And we need to import that. And then we'll go ahead and comment out this old reducer down here. Okay. Okay. So the first thing this create reducer function takes in is the initial state. This is for type safety and type inference, so that as you're filling out your different cases, the state object that's getting passed in, you can actually see the types on it. So the first thing, like I said, is initial state. Then the second thing and subsequent parameters will be each action type you want to switch on. The difference is it's not really a switch statement anymore. It's just a series of methods. And so we have to import this function called on. All right. And that comes from NgRx store. All right. And then I'm having problems with my VS Code again. And then we have our feature actions. So let's go ahead and import that from our actions file. Yeah. Let me just do a quick reload. See if we can fix that problem. All right, cool. So kind of using our original reducer as a guide, the first action we want to handle is the load. So we just say feature actions.load. The next parameter to the on method is an event, or is a handler or an arrow function, and it takes in state and optionally a props parameter, and then returns the new version of the state. And so you should be able pretty one for one to come down here and copy what your return was. So we'll go ahead and copy that. And then I'm just going to paste that here inside the parentheses. Right? So that handles that case. Now we want to add our next case, which is load success. So it's on feature actions dot load success. This time around, we do want to pull something out of the props. So we'll just wrap in parentheses state. And then we're going to do a destructure in here. And instead of just saying props, we would actually just destructure and say, give me the jokes property. And then we'll go ahead and copy our piece here. Need to import our feature adapter, right? And then this is no longer action.payload.jokes. It's just jokes. Cool. Let's import that action while it's yelling at us. Okay. All right, so that takes care of that case. We need to do our failure. So let's add another on. Feature actions load failure. And we do need to get a prop out, so we'll destructure out error. Okay. And then we're just going to return state. Oops. And is loading false error with that. I've got a missing parenthesis. There we go. And an extra one there. Okay. So now again, we're just taking in our state and then our props. All right. And then our last one we need to handle is select. So we'll just say on feature actions select state, and then we do take props in, so we need the ID, right? And then that's going to be .. state, selected joke ID is ID. All right, because that's all we needed to update. And then the cool thing is we don't have to worry about the default state. The create reducer handles that for us. So I don't even have to add that. And you know, I've seen developers that are newer to NgRx actually forget that in their switch and cause havoc. Very unexpected behavior in the apps. And so this is just another added safety measure. If you use the create reducer method, you don't have to worry about it. So let's go ahead and get rid of our switch here. And you might be asking, why do I have to say const feature reducer and then down below it say export function reducer? Well, this is just something we need to do to support ahead of time compiling. So that's why when you do the snippet, it automatically scaffolds out both pieces. So this is our new reducer. And if we go ahead and we'll compare it again with the get diff, definitely some reduction of code here. You don't need all the switch and case and return keywords. You don't need the default state. We don't need to use the action types or action unions. So yeah, so that's the new reducer. And it gets used in the same way in the module. I mean, it gets added in the same manner. The difference here is this actually just needs to become reducer because we changed the name of the item we were exporting. We could have named that reducer or feature reducer if we wanted to, but we did not. All right, so there's our updated reducer. And our effect should still work. So let's go ahead and run the app and just confirm everything is working. All right. There we go. Looks like things are working good. Our store is working with the dev tools. And we can view jokes. We can refresh. Boom. So same end result, which is great. And the last thing I want to cover in this video is how to upgrade to use the new create effect. So to do that, we're going to get away from using a decorator, and we're actually going to use a creator function. So we're here in our effects class. So we're going to go ahead and refactor this first one. We're going to take off effect, decorator, and then we're going to take off the type. We're just going to say equals that. And then the next thing is we're going to actually say create effect. This is a function that takes a handler in it. And we're going to wrap the whole actions pipe thing in that handler. And then I'm just going to import create effect. And that's it. It's now been turned in to use the effect creator. Now you might be asking, how do I handle, you know, a scenario where we were passing like options like dispatch false? So we'll get there. So let's go ahead and refactor this one. Take the type off, create effect, that, boom, it's done. All right. And then the last one is we do need to be able to pass dispatch false to this. So to do that, we'll say create effect, same way, but you can pass an optional config as your second parameter, and you can say dispatch false. Okay. While we're here, there was a new feature added called resubscribe on error, and I'm not sure why it's not showing, but it might be coming in a future minor release. But the idea that if for whatever reason you didn't have a catch error in your effect, which if you're newer to RxJS and NgRx, you know, that's a common mistake we see. the first time an error happens, your effect is short-circuited. And so if you were to try to do that action again, the second time, nothing would happen. And so we have kind of the default is to resubscribe on error, meaning it resubscribes the observable so it doesn't short-circuit it. But I believe the intention is to have a property here in the second parameter where you can say resubscribe on error, and you can set that to false. So if you don't want it to do that for whatever reason, you might have a specific use case, then that would be the scenario. All right, so now we're using the create effect. That's really, that's all there is to that. So if we look at our get diff again, we've got some cleanup. I mean, this shows the action part we cleaned up, but also we've removed the decorator. All right. So it's a common pattern you're seeing. We're using these creator functions. I do want to clarify that you do not have to do it this way. It's an optional piece. The old, or version 7 and prior way of doing things still functions in version 8. All right. So now let's go ahead and run it one more time. Open up our browser, and everything's working. So there you go. That is upgrading to Angular 8 and NgRx 8 and taking advantage of the new creator functions. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, Wes Grimes. I'm at Wes Grimes on Twitter. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or any of the other members of the NgRx team, and we'll give you a hand. So the last part, just real quick, wanted to kind of plug, if you're interested to contribute in NgRx, we have set up a new page on our website under Docs, down in the bottom left, called Contributing. This will walk you through beginning to end how to submit a pull request, bug report, feature request to the NgRx platform. Brandon and Jan, Nicholas at the beginning, there's a video where they walk through contributing to docs. So if you want to enhance our documentation, or if you're finding typos or technical errors, this video will walk through how to do it. We've also taken some time to document our folder structure. So if you're like, where do I go to, fix this one thing, you should be able to use this kind of as a roadmap or guide to find those areas. All right. So just wanted to point that out. We love contributions. The community is what makes this framework so great. It's not just this core team dictating everything, and it has to be this way. We work as a community, and we depend on the community to supply us with bug fixes, new features, documentation, and all that. So we really appreciate that. All right. Well, I hope you guys have a good evening, and we will talk to you later.